Hi everyone, Yvette St.Amant here. Thank you for subscribing to YSApaint, and I hope you enjoy this free hydrangea tutorial. All right, I'm excited to show you all how to paint some hydrangeas today. What you're going to need for this little project is a piece of watercolor paper. This is a piece of my 9x12 watercolor paper right here, just from the pad. So I tore a piece off. And I'm using my Yvette St.Amant brushes. I'm going to be using my number 8 brush today. And the colors I'm going to use are from my Tropic Vibe Collection. Don't let the big bottles fool you. These aren't available. They are my testers. Still going through the paint. But we're going to be using Wisteria Blue, Olive, which is a beautiful green. And I'm going to be using my Fig Mist. You also want to make sure that you have Trillium White, or you can use Sea Pearl if you want a little bit of a warmer tone. Either one, but these are going to be this is the paint we're going to use to actually make the petals, believe it or not. And I'm going to share this really cool technique with you. Now, my pack has 3 different kind of sizes of brushes. Actually, it has a little bit more, but there's a 4, 6, and 8. And you can use any of these brushes. I'm going to use an 8 because I like my petals a little thicker. Now, I'm going to walk you through this process because as we start painting, that's where we start developing these petals. But what I know most of my students like to do just prior to getting in with the paint is a little bit of planning. This is absolutely not necessary, but for those of you that want a little bit more guidance, what I'm going to have you do, because we're going to do 3 clusters. Ooh, I have shavings, eraser shavings all over my paper. What I'm going to have you do is just 3 round circles. This is going to help guide you on where we're going to do the flowers. So I'm going to do mine really dark, but I don't want you to, okay? I'm just doing it so that you can see. So basically we're going to have 3 different colored flowers here, and then we're going to get a stem in after, but we're just going to paint that. I'm going to show you how to do that after. Okay, let's start with our first color, and I'm going to use Wisteria Blue. So I'm going to get Wisteria Blue on my palette. And you know what? I'm going to use some Sea Pearl because I like the warmth of that. All right. What I'm going to do is you can take either your 1/2 inch or your 1 inch that is from the starter bundle. And I'm actually going to take my 1/2 inch. It doesn't matter. What we're going to do is basically we're going to take all this nice thick paint and we are going to get it in one of these circles. We're doing a lot of it. We're just going to put it nice and thick. We want to have it thick, nice thick coat because we want that paint. Now my paint stays dry a lot longer than most paints. We want to keep it, or sorry, stays wet more than most paints, and that's what we want. We want it to stay nice and wet because we're going to start creating petals. Okay, so we're just kind of doing a rough shape. And then I'm going to take my paint. Do not work that paint in. We need to keep it wet. Now what we're going to do is we're going to dip our brush, our dry brush, into the Sea Pearl. And I'm going to start in the middle. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press down. We're going to do petals. So we're going to press down. And we're going to do 4 petals like this. I'm going to dip my brush in the paint again. So we're never washing our brush. Okay, and we're not getting that paint off. These are going to start developing the little petals. And these little flowers that make up the hydrangea, the more paint you have on your brush that build up, as we're doing this technique, the more successful your flowers are going to be. So you have to have a little patience in the beginning. See how they start blending? This, we see more of the paint. So basically our paint is working with itself. It's blending those beautiful colors right on our watercolor paper on the paper. Okay, and then we want to draw these petals and these flowers off of that circle. Okay, so basically what's happening is we are utilizing the circle as a background to our flowers so we could build up those hydrangeas. Okay, so I'm going to start kind of creating these petals outside of the circle. Again, we're just doing 4. Each flower has 4 petals. And keep going. Now in some areas you're going to have bluer paint, more paint that's wet, and in other areas it's going to be a little more dry, and that's the beautiful thing about it is the hydrangeas will start forming as you start filling up this little circle with these petals. So you'll just keep continuing to do that and watch the magic unfold. Isn't that pretty? So I'm going to leave this area where that circle overlaps. We're going to leave it because we're going to build our other color in. Okay, and then what you can do is just add some little single petals where you see the paint, the circle underneath, because we want to cover that. We want to draw these little petals off the page. And you can go over some of the blue petals in your cream to get a little more highlight and variation. Your paint is still going to be wet. This technique definitely works better when you're using my paint because it stays wetter. Okay, so we've got the blue one done for now. What I'm going to do is rinse my brush so we can start with the next color. Okay, I'm going to be using my olive. So we are using the same technique in the next flower. I need my 1/2-inch brush, so let me just clean that off with the blue. I like to have a paper towel here so I can just get that excess water and paint off my brush. So same thing, we are just going to get the green paint nice and thick on the paper. You don't have to worry about this doing a perfect circle. Okay, and you can see the opacity of my paint is covering up the pencil marks underneath. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a little bit of my blue that I used over here, and I'm going to draw a little bit of that paint into the center. And you don't need to do that, but what's cool is you start getting, you know, those hydrangeas that are blue and green. It's a really, really, really pretty variation. So we're going to do the same process here. I'm going to start over here this time where the colors meet. Okay, so same technique. We're just dipping into the cream paint. If you're using white, it works the same with the white. And again, just have some patience with the process because as you start building up the petals, that's when the paints start blending together and your hydrangeas start forming. One, two, three, four. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to add a couple petals up there. Build my flowers off the page. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's okay if your petals start overlapping one another too, because naturally flowers have petals in behind the cluster and in front, so you want to utilize that overlap. And you can do this technique with any color you want. You can mix colors. So if you wanted to, I'll show you in a minute here. If I want to get a little bit more blue on here, what I can do is dip my brush in a little bit of blue and blend a little bit of blue in these petals up here. So there's a little bit more variation, and we're bringing that blue into the petals. If you like pink and you want to do pink hydrangeas, you can do that. But this is a nice way to get like different variations in shades and tones. I know there's a special name for this hydrangea that has the blue and green in it, and I can't remember what it is. So, but if you love hydrangeas as much as me, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Okay, look at that. We've got our green one in. So now I'm going to rinse my brush. And remember, this is a pre-recorded video, so if you need to pause to catch up, you can certainly do that. And just know that this isn't the final painting. We have a lot more little layers, so this is going to be a build-up. Okay, I'm getting a little bit of my fig mist. So we're going to do a purple hydrangea. So I need my 1/2-inch brush again so I could get a base coat. Same technique. We're just going to get some of that paint nice and thick, leaving it wet on the surface. Okay, and I'm going to actually bring a little bit of that purple because I want this hydrangea to be in the front. All right, so same technique. We're going to start with our seed pearl and start building our petals. You'll notice when you start building, after you wash your brush and you start building your petals, they're going to be a little bit thinner. The magic starts happening the more paint that you have on your brush. So just be patient and keep working your little petals, and the magic will start to unfold. I promise you. You know, oftentimes when we're learning how to paint, our paintings get a little ugly before they become beautiful. This is the natural process of building layers. And what we're doing is we are just building the foundation right now to these hydrangeas. So there's not a lot of highlight and lowlights. We are going to get some highlights in there in the center of these flowers. So don't you worry. We're going to get to that process. Right now, we want to build the layers. We want to build depth with these flowers. And this is the process that we do in order to get there. So see how I have so much paint on my brush now? Now I'm starting to get those round petals. Whoops. Okay, I'll rinse my brush. I'm going to let this dry. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do is get a stem in. So I'm going to stick with my Tropic Vibe collection here. We're going to use some of, let's see, we're going to use our Peacock Green. Peacock Green is my darkest green. We're going to take a little bit of that. I'm going to add a little bit more of the olive. And I want to take a little bit of my Peacock Green. I'm going to take a little bit of my purple, which is my Fig Mist. So I'm going to mix a little color here. Okay, there's a little bit of red in this. I want to make a deeper color here. Add a little bit of olive. So what I want to do is I'm making like a little bit of a branch for my hibiscus. I'm going to grab a little more of the Fig Mist. So I'm going to make this kind of sagey tone. And we are going to create a branch. So hydrangeas, there are these clusters, and if you have a stem like this, there's like little kind of clusters that go off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine they're in the center of each of these circles. There's a branch kind of connecting. So I'm going to go from the middle of this top circle and just kind of make like this stem that curves down. And that's a pretty kind of sagey army green. So I'm going to draw a little curve. We're going to make it a little thicker at the bottom here. Okay. And then I'm going to have a little stem that comes from the middle of this one. And it's going to connect. And then we're going to do the same thing here. What I like to do is like take a little bit of the olive and just get some other little tones of green into the stem, just to give it dimension. It's a painterly way. I'm going to rinse my brush. And then we're going to get our Peacock Green right out of the bottle. And I'm going to use that right where the flowers connect. Okay, so it gives it a little depth. Get a little shadow here underneath. And then I think we need to get a little leaf in. So I'm going to start with my Peacock Green, and I'm going to have a little leaf coming out here. So what we're going to do is just start with a line, and then I like to get a little paint on my brush and almost do, so the leaves are a little wider. I just do strokes coming into the center. Don't worry about going over the flower because we need to get highlights on that flower. Okay. And then I'll come in and do the same thing on the other side. Just like this. We're just doing simple strokes into the center. And it's just like a painterly way to do these leaves. Then you could come in with your sage and do another little layer on the tip so we can build dimension in between the last strokes. Get a little bit of our olive and get some highlights in the middle. See that? So I like to keep the darkest color at the base where these flowers are. So we've got one little leaf there. And we're going to do a little one coming out here. Same thing, we're just going to start putting brush strokes into the center of that line. Okay, go into our sage, get another little layer in between. Just kind of building up that color. Then we take our olive and get a little highlight. So you can see how I do not clean my brush in between. Okay, we're going to do one up here in between this leaf. So I'm going to go into my Peacock Green again. And we're going to have a little leaf coming out this way. So we always start with a little line. And then we can start building the leaf out with simple brush strokes. Again, do not worry about going over some of those flowers because we're going to get some highlights on the flowers when our paint starts drying. And then I'm going back into my olive to get some highlights on the tip. Isn't that pretty? Okay, let's get a leaf coming out over here. I'll put a little bend with a curve. This is a nice way to kind of get some dimension to your leaves. It's just bending it. This is again the Peacock Green. And I'm going to take my color that I mixed here, go in between, build up some dimension with those different colors of green. I'm just going to fill this in with the dark green for now. Then we're going to go into olive, get some highlights. You know, painting it can be just an illusion depending where you put your paint strokes. And that's what makes painting really quite therapeutic and fun, because it eliminates that stress of having to make everything just look so realistic, but just using simple brush strokes and that illusion that you're, you know, painting a flower or the leaf just by using simple brush strokes is really nice. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do just a little tiny leaf coming off the side here. It's always a really nice way to kind of fill up negative space, is just to add like a little leaf, because then we have this big kind of gap here. So I'm just going to do a little leaf, same technique, just like a little half leaf, a little curve. I'm going to take a little bit of my green and mix a little more of this. So I'm taking some of our Fig Mist, Peacock Green, and Olive Green to build that kind of army green color again, because I ran out. Okay. And then I'll get a little of the olive green, get some highlights there. Isn't that cute? This is the point where I'll kind of step back and say, hey, I don't know that I'm liking that both of these stems were covered, so I'm just going to give the illusion that there's another stem here. All right. Maybe yours worked out okay, but sometimes I just like to add a little something. So there's my hydrangeas with our leaves. Now what we want to do is come in and add more highlight to our flowers. So this is where I will come in and add a little bit of white. If you used white, you're still going to come in with white, and you're just going to add a little more white on certain areas to add highlights. So we want certain petals to kind of pop. So we're going to go and do the same process of these petals, just over certain areas to get a little highlight. Okay, make them pop, especially when they're overlapping, you know, the other flowers down here where they're overlapping the leaves. So you're just going over some of these leaves, petals. Okay, and your paint's going to be wet in certain areas. So what'll be nice is it'll pick up some of those colors underneath and change the tones. You're going to get more variety of tones as you start building these highlights. See how it's starting to pop with the highlights. You don't want to cover every petal because we don't want to lose like the darker shades and tones underneath. We just want to get some variation. But this is where you're going to go over, make sure you go over the areas where the leaves are so we get that covered. Okay. So pretty. Okay, and then I'm going to move on to my purple. I like to really make sure that I'm using the white to go over the areas that overlap the flowers down here and up here. So we're using that. And you can start seeing the dimension of these flowers building up. Don't be afraid to go over. I have a lot of like wet areas, and I like to utilize that to just bring in some of those yummy tones. Okay, and you can go back and forth over a few if you like. Just kind of love how it brings in, you know, the other colors. So pretty. If you want to come in with a couple of the cream, there's just so many colors that you can do and start bringing into these flowers. It's all about layering. I often will come back with my creams and whites so I can get all those yummy tones in. Okay. So now I'm going to rinse my brush. And we're going to do the final touch, which are the little centers in your hydrangea. I like to just use my Peacock Green, like the dark green that I have, and I just get a little bit of paint on the tip of my brush. And then I could go and put little dots in the centers of those little 4-petaled flowers. Everything is suggestive. So if you have like a half flower or you have a little negative space, just put a little dot in there. It'll give an illusion that there's a flower in behind. It's these little final touches that really bring your hydrangeas to life. Okay, you can use the same color for these flowers. Just tapping lightly. You don't want to press too hard or you're going to get a really big dot. So just tap, put little centers in. And I've done these lessons in my retreats. The beautiful thing is everybody's looks a little bit different just because of the different pressure applications you're using when you do your petals. And that's how we develop our style. So it's not about comparing. I want to compare your work to somebody else's. You just want to experience the process, and you end up with a beautiful hydrangea painting. And that is my tutorial on how you paint hydrangeas. I hope you enjoyed it. I just want to thank you for subscribing to YSApaint and utilizing my paints and products. If you want to check out any more of my courses, you can go ahead and check those out at YvetteSt.Amant.com. There is a link at the YSApaint website as well. Have a beautiful day.